My mom returned home after 20 years of abandoning us. What now? Trigger warning, this story contains sensitive content related to us aside my parents became teenage parents. My mom was 17, and my dad was 18 at the time. A year after I was born, my mom suddenly broke up with my dad, claiming she had fallen out of love. However, I later learned from my dad's friends that the real reason behind their breakup was that my mom had fallen in love with someone else while they were still together. She ended things with my dad to avoid being labeled as a cheater. I couldn't help but feel anger towards my mom when I heard this story. My dad tried numerous times to reconcile with my mom, not for himself, but for me. He didn't want me to grow up in a broken family. Sadly, my mom resisted any attempts to reconnect. She was already with the person she had left my dad for. As I listened to the story, my anger towards my mom grew. She claimed to sympathize with my dad, but she consistently defended her choices, even though they involved abandoning both him and me for a new relationship. Before my dad was buried, he promised to visit me on my 5th birthday. He couldn't bear to face the guilt he felt and was not yet ready to return to our hometown. However, he never fulfilled that promise. He didn't visit when I turned 5 years old. 20 years passed since the incident, and I tried my best to live my life not just for myself but also for my dad. At 21 years old, I pursued a degree in psychology because of what happened to my dad. While I knew I couldn't prevent everyone from contemplating suicide, I wanted to help anyone struggling with their mental health, as my dad never received the help he needed. My mom unexpectedly re-entered my life on my 21st birthday last April. It caught us off guard when someone was inquiring about my grandparents from my father's side. Our simple dinner with my grandparents and my dad's friends was interrupted. That's when my mom, 37 years old, arrived, allowed in by my confused grandma. She was accompanied by 2 children, a 10-year-old girl and a 7-year-old boy, who I assumed were my half-siblings. I had only seen her in photos, but I recognized her face, even as she aged. My dad's friends fell silent, struggling to contain their anger. My grandpa had a blank expression, while my grandma seemed to be on the verge of tears. I suppressed my anger, especially since there were children present. I invited my mom outside and asked my grandma to close the door to ensure our conversation remained private, in case I ended up shouting at her. As we stepped outside, I tried to calm myself down, but the burden she had left on me, my friends, and my grandparents burst forth uncontrollably. I'm usually polite, but I couldn't help but scream and point accusatory fingers at her. Yes, I blamed her for my dad's death, even though I knew she didn't intend for it to happen. She left me and my dad for another man, and ironically, the news I gathered from my dad's friends revealed that their relationship didn't last long. I unloaded all my fury at her, and all she could do was cry because she knew deep down that she was to blame. It felt like a thorn piercing my chest as I shouted at her. She kept apologizing for everything she had done, but I didn't listen. I immediately asked her and her children to leave because I couldn't handle the emotions overwhelming me at that moment. I was unalived with rage as I lay in bed that night, but I also felt guilty for being disrespectful towards her, given the circumstances. 5 months passed since that incident, and I still can't have a normal mother and son conversation with her. I visit her residence, but I spend time with my half-siblings instead. I try to maintain civility with my mom, not wanting the children to worry. My own mental health was already messed up when I was younger, and I don't want my siblings to suffer the same fate. I do want to check on her well-being. But my own pain always takes precedence whenever I see her. Update: my mom returned home after 20 years of abandoning us. What now? You can read part 1 here. I have an update to share after my last post. Given the heavy emotions I've been carrying lately, I thought it might be helpful to share this. Ha 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 ha. After posting my first story, my girlfriend encouraged me to ask my grandparents or my mom about it, following the response from Redditors. Since I wasn't emotionally and mentally ready to confront my mom, I decided to ask my grandparents in case they knew something. When I returned from my girlfriend's house, I asked my grandparents to poop down for a discussion. Without saying anything, it seemed like my grandpa already knew what I wanted to talk about, so he spoke up, saying, "What do you want to know about your mom, my grandchild?" Hearing that, I calmly asked them if they knew why my mom never returned to me after I turned 5. My grandma looked at me with sadness and couldn't speak, so my grandpa answered my question. He said that my mom did come back and fulfilled her promise. After hearing that, curiosity struck me as to why I never had the chance to even see her. He explained that my grandma initiated a conversation with my mom before they showed me to her when I returned home from school. I was in kindergarten at that time, so I didn't get to see or meet them. Also, note that my mom was accompanied by her boyfriend, whom she chose over my dad. My mom asked my grandparents if she could take me with her to live in Manila together with her boyfriend. However, my grandma refused because she felt a bad aura from my mom's boyfriend. Additionally, my mom wanted me to consider him as my dad since my biological father was already deceased. My grandparents were angry because my mom had cheated on my dad with this guy, and now she wanted me to accept him as my father. My grandpa expressed his disappointment, saying hurtful words about my dad and rebuked my mom's choices. He mentioned that I would understand her choices. Because I was smart, as I consistently received honors in school. That may have been the basis for her to believe that I would understand her decisions for me, for us. Upon hearing this, my grandparents immediately kicked out my mom and her boyfriend. The boyfriend started shouting and causing a scene, claiming that my mom was innocent. He even insulted my dad and hurled different insults, which was the last straw for my grandparents. My calm grandpa took his kitchen knife and chased after my mom's boyfriend. Given how he insulted my dad in front of his parents, I understand why my grandpa reacted that way. If he had caught up with him, the guy would probably be hospitalized. Thankfully, the neighbors intervened to stop my grandpa, although I wished to see that asshole suffer slowly. It's amazing how my grandparents acted as if nothing happened when they returned home. The funny thing about this story is that my mom eventually left her abusive boyfriend, proving my grandma's intuition about him was correct. She had another child who was 10 years old, while the other child was fathered by someone else who abandoned her. Now that I know everything, my reasons to completely remove her from my life, including my half-siblings, have grown even stronger. Her behavior is sickening, to say the least.